All right, and good morning, and welcome to today's session of A Course in Miracles. and well, let me rephrase that. This is our session of Truly Foundation and A Course in Miracles with your host Oliver Blue. And I am so delighted to be here with you today as we embark upon another lesson or another God idea that we're going to share today as we end this little section of the uh, this little section of the workbook lesson where um, we address the idea of what is sin, and we've addressed it, I think, in depthly. If you really want to, if you go back and listen to the recordings on workbook lessons uh, 251 through 260. That's basically what was being addressed in those 10 lessons. And answer the question about what is sin, and we've learned so much in these last 10 lessons and addressed it in such a way from the course's perspective, and in such a way that one should be able to make the necessary mind adjustments, to make the necessary uh, necessary adjustments to our perceptions about this idea or the concept. And I think the course addressed it very straightforward from the perspective of love, from the perspective of truth. And so if you can go back, if you haven't listened to, if that's a subject that you're interested in, well, the course addresses it totally different than what you would hear traditionally. And it comes from the reality of that God is, and that there is nothing else. So if God is, then there are no opposites in God. Everything that appears to happen outside of God is not a reality. It's not eternal. It's just an experience that one chooses to have um, as a way of experimenting with the tiny mad idea of separation. And even in that experiment, and even in that experience that one has, the reality of God goes with us within that experience as in the form of remembrance, and so that we can uh, find our way back to God, because there is nothing outside of God. And so that's where people experience what we call nightmares. That's where pain and suffering exists. Uh, that whole activity can be summed up by saying we go prodigal, or um, we entertain what the course called vain imaginings. It calls it fantasies, hallucinations. Um, but it's just a play with that which is not real. Of course, also calls it, a children's game, or a child game, or playing with sharp-edged children toys. When we make a decision to try to make of ourselves something, or to remake ourselves, or to give ourselves a makeover from what God created, because what God created is Himself. And that which God creates is infinite, it's impersonal, and it's self-aware. But when we try to make something other than that and call it reality, or to substitute that for which God created, therein lies the gap. Therein lies the belief in separation. Therein lies a tremendous amount of pain and suffering. But we can save ourselves 1,000 years of suffering and pain and anxiety and confusion when we use the gift of forgiveness to forgive ourselves, to release ourselves from every false image that we have of our hold of ourselves and of others. It's called forgiveness. And when we truly forgive, the only thing that is left is reality. The only thing that is left is love. The only thing that is left is God. The only thing that is left, if that is that which God created, which is himself. He calls it the I am. The only thing that is left is the real you. Just like our ticker there say, the only thing that is left is the real you. Now there's something separate, but it's something that is in oneness with the Father. Something that is what the Course called oneness, joinedness, one. We come to realize that we are one with our Creator. That it's impossible for us not to be. Why? Because it's impossible for separation to occur in that which is perfect. Perfect. And that which is perfect is God. And that which is perfect is you. And perfection only means that you are whole and you are complete. And it also means that what you are unalterable and you can't be who you really are is unalterable and unchangeable. That's just what it means. It's very simple. It's not complicated. We make things complicated when we fall asleep and go on a dream. And go on a journey looking for what is already present. That's what makes life complicated. But life is very simple. God is very simple. To the point where he said, look, I am that. I am. To the point where he says, God is, and there is nothing else. To the point where it says, I and you and me, we're one. When you've seen me, you've seen you, because you and me are one. That's how simple life is. That's how simple our existence is. That's how simple our reality is. It's just that simple. But with just a tiny mad idea, like, what would it be like to be separate from this oneness? Can I break this oneness apart and make something else? Just that tiny mad idea created all of this. And all of the history of humanity came out of that, that little tiny mad idea. But it was a tiny mad idea that had no reality, and it still has no reality. And you find that out when you wake up, when you recognize the truth that is true always. Not a change, but a recognition. And so today is the last lesson in this section on what is sin. And it's lesson 260. And what a way to culminate this whole idea, which really points to our identity. It is all about answering that identification question. Who are we? Just like Jesus' disciple asked him, Jesus asked his disciple, he said, who do men say that I am? It was a rhetorical question because Jesus already knew who men said that he was. And Peter got a direct revelation from God. He says, or he asked, who do you say that I am? And Peter got a direct revelation from God. And he said, you are the anointed one. You are the creation of God. You are the Son of God. And he used the word, or the Bible used the word Christ. Christ basically is an all-encompassing word to denote the oneness of God, to denote the one self, the one life, the one love, the one reality that we all share. That we all share. Paul described it as a mystery, but it's not a mystery. It's a reality. Christ, he said Christ in you. But an upgrade to that is Christ is you, or Christ as you, because Christ is you. Christ basically denote the oneness of God, which includes you and me. And that's what he meant when Scripture says that all things have been reconciled into the one thing. And he called that one thing Christ. So it's just an all-encompassing word for love or for God. You know, the course uses Christian terms because a lot of people internationally are familiar with Christian terms. Course in Miracles is not promoting Christianity, but it uses a lot of the Christian language to help us understand. It has to lead. We have to use some languaging, so that's what was chose. And but this is a book that shares universal principles. This is not promoting any one religion or idea over another, but it promotes the universality of the oneness that we all share. So welcome to this space. We call it Truly Foundation. And so today's idea, lesson 260, again, it's a great combination to the last 9 lessons that really just points directly at our identity. It goes directly to aligning us into and bringing us into a complete acceptance of who we are. It puts to rest the identification question. Who are you? And so here, the idea for today, like the last 3, starts out with the 3 words, let me remember. Let me remember. And who is the me that it is talking about? Is it talking about the me that God created, or is it talking about the me that appears to be in this perceptual world? Just think, that which is perfect needs no remembrance. In heaven, there's nothing to remember. In perfection, there's nothing to remember. So it has to be talking to this self that seemingly that doesn't have clarity about who it is. And so it says, let me remember. So remember, the idea of remembering is a huge theme in the Course in Miracles. Why? Remember, the Course is written on 2 levels. The level of reality, and it also addresses the mind that thought it separated itself from reality. Because reality is always what it is. The real you has always been home in the heart of God. But the you that fell asleep and dreaming of separation, the runaway child running wild, that's looking to come back home, that is the Course also speaks to that a perceptual self. And so that is the one that needs to be reminded. That is what needs to be reminded. That part of us that has this sense of separation. This part of us that seems like we're on an island of ourselves. This part of us that experiences suffering and pain and anxiety and fear. It's a part of us that we made ourselves based on what? Wrong information, misinformation. And so the course was given to us back in 1977 as a gift to help us what? To find our way out of the maze, to find our way back home, to find our way back to ourselves. And so here when it says, let me remember, it's talking to that perceptual self. He said, let me remember God. Notice now, let me remember God. Let me remember love. Let me remember my reality. Because it is God that what created me. It is love that created me. It is my reality that created me. Let me remember God created me, and I didn't create myself, or I didn't make myself. This world didn't make me. Or that which I received from my parents, which is a body. That is not what God created. What God created was formless and timeless. What God created was his very own self. And he calls that which he created you and me, the I am. So let me not forget this. Let me not forget, but let me remember that God created me. And not only did God create me, but I remain as God created me. That's the good news. that me that God created is eternal, and it is infinite, and it is impersonal, and it's self-aware. What God created was his very own self. So that's why the Course says we are oneness, joined as one. So what was made by us through the process that we call birth in a physical body, that's not what God created. That's what our parents made. And what our parents made, it's not what? It's not eternal. The body is not eternal. It's a finite event. The body has a birth and a death. So the body is just a temporary experience. It's not who we are. It's not for identification. It basically becomes a vehicle of communication by which we express our true self, that infinite and impersonal and self-aware self in this dimension of life. Because without the body, you can't express in this experience. So that's what the body is for. And when the body is 100% expressing its true identity, when the body is 100% affirming that which is true about us, that which is infinite and impersonal and self-aware, the body becomes a healthy, serviceable instrument. In other words, the body will robustly serve our ultimate purpose, serve the will of God. And we don't have to be concerned about the body when we don't try to make the body our identification. But see, when we put purposes on the body that it cannot handle, it breaks down. It is not who you are. And 90% of the people in this world, probably 95, believe that they are their physical body. And that it's their physical body that was going to be changed and live forever. And see, that idea is not a God idea. No. That which you are needs no modification, needs no change. The DNA that you are, which is the same DNA that God is, it needs no improvement, no modification, or no change. So there is no change in your reality. There's only a recognition that your reality is changeless and formless and timeless and eternal. It's only a recognition. And so when we begin to understand this, we come less and less body focus. But our focus is on our mind. Our focus becomes on the image that we hold of ourselves. Because we realize that the body is basically The body is basically a good servant. The body will serve us well. I mean, it will absolutely serve you well when the mind is in alignment and in harmony with this true self, its true identity. It goes like this. What are we thinking? Because those thoughts are going to generate feelings within us. All thoughts have with it a feeling. Why? Because thoughts are no more than energy. Life is an energy. It's the one energy. And when that energy touches us, when that energy flows through us, it is looking to express itself. And it expresses itself through thoughts and ideas. So what thought or idea are we holding about ourselves will determine what that energy does, because that energy, it has the capacity to do whatever our thoughts and ideas and feelings reflect, and it does. Your experience of life up until this moment has been a reflection of your thoughts and your ideas and what you embraced as your own, what you have accepted as your own. You have that power, you have that freedom. Why? Because you are a free spirit. You have free spirit. You're a free spirit. You're just like God. But God only knows love. God don't know anything about opposite. God doesn't know anything about separation. God doesn't know anything about life or death. God doesn't know anything about duality, polarity. All this is what laws that we created, the laws that we made. God knows one law, and that's the law of love. And in that, everything is all encompassing. And so it's all about that. What are we doing with the mind that we've been given? When we substitute the mind that we've been given, which is known as the mind of God or the mind of Christ, which is every thought of God. When we try to substitute that with something that we've made up, which is a perceptual mind that believes in separation, that's where things go sideways. And we all have experienced that. And that's why transformation is so important. So we can take our misalignment and realign it with that which is true. That's what transformation is, the renewing of the mind. That's what this whole Course in Miracles is all about. It's a course in mind training. It's a course in mind reversal. It's a course in miracles. What is the miracles? When we shift the way we think to align with true perception. That little tiny shift makes all the difference. Just like the little tiny mad idea made the difference, perceived difference, that created a whole world. A little mad idea can create a whole world. That's how powerful the things that we are working with here. We are divine beings. And when we come to understand the enormity of what we're working with here and the freedom that we have to choose, it's like giving a kid. It's like life is like giving a kid turning a kid loose. In a room that's filled with computers and giving a kid, it's like giving a kid access to everything in the world and say, go at it. Life is kind of like that. I mean, that's what we've done. We experimented with life, not knowing. That's why you see what we see happening, We don't understand. How could this happen? How could this be? How could God let this happen? How could God let this be? Well, it has nothing to do with God. It has to do with our what? Our detour into what? Into experimenting with the tiny man idea of separation. So it is so important that we what? That we come into the knowledge of truth so that we don't destroy. So that we don't destroy the purpose or the experience for which we exist. That's why transformation is so important. That's why it's important for you to have mentors in your life, coaches in your life, someone in your ear that has been down the road and they understand life. That's what Jesus meant when he said, well, I am the truth, I'm the way into life. No one can have an understanding of what life is all about unless they understand it from the Father. He said, but by me. He wasn't talking about him as an individual. He was talking about, but by the one way. By truth. But by me represent by the truth. See, things happen and operate in a certain way. And when we don't know the way that they operate, it's called the law. And that which is present to bless us can become what? Pain and suffering. It's about, and it comes from what? Not knowing. I was in a class a week ago and the question was asked, what is the two major expenses that we have in our life? What are the two things that we probably spend more of our resources on? It was like a quick, it was like a trick question, but it wasn't a quick trick question. He was trying to share something with us. So most people say, oh, my mortgage, my car, my boat, my vacation home, my this, my that. People were just naming things that because they're naming it based on what they're spending, where most of their money is going. And then at the end of that, he said, well, I see nobody mention taxes. And so he said, well, in reality, your number 2 expense in life is taxes, because most of us, what most people spend is about 51% of their income on taxes. That's true, really, when you think about all the different taxes that you pay, not just income tax, but anytime you make a transaction, there's a tax. In certain states, like my state, you buy gas, you pay tax. There's a tax on that gas. Grocery, there's tax. Everything is tax. So he said about 51% of our resources go to tax. And then he said, but the number one thing that we spend our resources on, he said the number one thing, most people thought they were going to say their houses or what, right? He said, but the number one thing we spend our resources on is not knowing. Not knowing? What do you mean, not knowing? He said, because of us not knowing who we are. It's because of not knowing how to function in life, how to walk in the infinite abundant self that we are, because we don't know how. He said, not knowing how to attract in your life what is required of you, because what is required of us, because we're God's highest creation, what is required for us is everything that we could possibly need in whatever form we need it, because in our infinite self there is no lack, there is no scarcity. He said, but because we don't know that, it is costing us a tremendous amount. It is costing us a tremendous amount. So that's the biggest expense we have, is not knowing. That's why it's so important to have a coach or a mentor in your life. And if you don't have one, and when you look at the results of your life, you understand that those results are based on what you know. And what you don't know is what is present and is what is a part of you that could remove all pain and suffering, that can remove all unhappiness. Did you know that the word happiness means having no need for nothing? That's what happiness is. What? Having no lack or scarcity in your life. And not just talking about material things, but we're talking about the whole gamut. Just talking about your holistic self. Every part of you, your emotional, your psychological self, your self-awareness, your self-image, your physical self. And all the abilities that you have to live life to the fullest. That's what happiness is. There's nothing missing. There's nothing broken. And so the cost of experiencing your full happiness by not knowing, that's your biggest expense. That's our biggest expense. That's why Jesus said that grace and peace is multiplied unto us through what? Through the knowledge. Why? Because knowledge is everything. And not just knowledge, but understanding. And I'm not talking about just head knowledge. I'm talking about when it says knowledge, this word is an intimate word. When we're not intimately acquainted with our true self, with our true identification. That in and of itself creates a falsehood whereby we try to go out and make up the difference. That's what Adam and Eve did. That's the story of Adam and Eve. They tried to go out of the garden and make up the difference. That's what happened to the prodigal son. Give me my inheritance. And he went out to a far country and tried to make up the difference. And you see what happened in both cases. Why? Because there is no difference. There is nothing outside of God. There's nothing outside of your reality. It needs no what? Your reality needs no modification, and it needs no improvement. Who you are. You are complete in him. That's what the word holiness means. That you are complete and you are whole. It has nothing to do with how your actions. No, because when you know who you are, your actions will reflect that. Our actions will reflect it. In fact, our action is reflecting who we think ourselves to be. So where there is a low self-image of ourselves, where there is a belief that we can't measure up to our reality, where there's a sense of separation, where there's a sense of inequality among ourselves and with God. All this is costing us. It's costing you your peace. It's costing you your joy, your happiness, your fulfillment, and your contentment. So our number one aim of this course is to know thyself and to release all others, to know yourself and to release all other. The first part of these workbook lessons was all about the release. Who we thought we were, what we thought we made, what we thought happened. And then the second part, which is what we're in right now, since lesson 222, is all about when we release that which we're not, that which we are is the only thing present. That which we are is the only thing present. So, lesson 260. Let me remember that God created me. That is so important. That is so important. It should be our number one priority. That's why Jesus, when he had his last official meeting with his mentors, Jesus was the greatest coach that ever lived. And when he had his last official meeting with his mentors, and he took out the bucket, and he took out the wash basin, and he took himself a towel and he knelt down and he washed the disciples' feet. That was only symbolic. Jesus was symbolic. That was only symbolic to give them something to remind themselves of the oneness that they share. That's why he said, you must allow me to wash your feet. What? That was symbolic. It's saying, look, you must embrace the reality that we are one, that we have equality. And when you have equality, we understand that we're here to serve one another. Why? Because we are one another. We are one another. There is not 2, 3, 4. It's not a multiplicity. It's not 8 billion, but it is only the one. And there's complete value in the one. And so he said, and he washed each of his mentors' feet. And it was only symbolic, not for anything for us to make a shrine over or build a religion around. What are you trying to get into our minds? The oneness that we share, the equality that we have, not only with each other, but with God. And that our true nature is love. And love, what? Love gives. Love gives. Love gives. And then he went on to say, hey, let's eat this. Let's eat this bread and let's drink of this cup as a symbol, not to build a religion around, but as a symbol of our oneness, as a symbol of our equality. And then we took that and, oh my God, what we've done with that. He said to not just eat and drink, but to eat and drink worthily, because we all are worthy. Know that you are worthy. Know that you are a part of this oneness. And that can never change. That's all it was symbolic of. It was never an act that he performed for us to use it to bring people into guilt and judgment and condemnation by telling them they can't eat of the cup. You've done this, you can't do that. We made a mess of it. But no, it's all about demonstrating the oneness that we share and our complete holiness and sinlessness. That's why Paul picked up on that in Ephesians chapter 1, when he said, before the foundation of the world, God in his I don't want to miss it. It says, according as he has chosen us, in accordance, in alignment, in harmony with how we have been created. In accordance to how we've been created. Here he said, he used the word chosen us. And sometimes we take that as special. He chose some and not chose other. No. what God chose, he created, and he created all things. So all things have been chosen. Many have called. All have been called, and all have been chosen. But we're not chosen ourselves because of guilt, condemnation, fear, sin consciousness. He said, but according as we have been created, we have been chosen. He says, in him. Before, when did he do this? Before the foundation of the world. See, your existence didn't start in a hospital or in a birthing bed or with a midwife, but your existence began before the foundation of the world. Therefore, you are a timeless and formless being, and you remain that way. That's the real you. He says, according as he has chosen us in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be how? That we should be holy. It wasn't a wish. He said, this is the way I created you, in holiness. So you are holy. He said that you should be holy and blameless, without blame. So where is the guilt coming from? Where is the blame coming from? It's coming from a falsehood. But we was created in holiness and in innocence, and it remains. It hasn't been changed or affected. The only thing that's changed or affected is a tiny mind idea that we, entertained. But the moment you release that idea, your recognition and your awareness of the whole and complete you, the real you, your recognition and your acknowledgement of this innocent you that you are, that we all share, it becomes what? Into your awareness. And in that moment, everything changes. Everything changes. Holy and without blame, in love. Why? Because we are born of love. This is our true identity. But one tiny mad idea brought on a plethora of ideas that were contrary to our nature. And put us all in a state of what? State of sleep. A state of sleep. But one by one, when you come to recognize the truth of who you are, you wake up from the dream of separation. And you realize that as God is, so are you in this world. And that you have a mission and a purpose. And that mission and the purpose has to do with those that are asleep, those that are unaware and unawakened, those that have not recognized their true identity. They're still holding on to that false self. And our purpose is to be the light of the world, to be the light that others can see their way out of the state of sleep. So they can have their rebirth, so they can have their moment of enlightenment, their moment of awakening, just like you. And the good news is that God has guaranteed that all of us individually, one by one, shall wake up to the truth. Even if it takes 1,000 lifetimes for it to happen, it will happen. That's what God promised. And God swore by himself. God made an oath to himself that this is the blessing that I have blessed my creation with. Yes, yes, yes. So let me remember God created me. Do this in remembrance of me. That's what the symbol was that Jesus was demonstrating to his mentors, to his brothers, his sisters. That the memory of God that came with us is in all of us. Eternity is in all humanity. It just needs to be unveiled, unobscured, uncovered. So that what? That which was lost can be found. That which was blind, what can be seen? Can see. And so the lesson today starts out with pretty much an affirmation. It's kind of a culmination of this section that we've learned about our sinlessness and our guiltlessness and our fearlessness. And so it's kind of like an affirmation. It goes like this. It says, Father, I did not make myself. Although in my insanity, I thought I did. Insanity is not a bad word. What we come to realize is that when we was under the wrong assumption or the error or the mistake of thinking that we made ourselves. He just called that phase in your experience insanity. Because we thought we made ourselves. But here it says, I did not make myself. So you have to come to that conclusion that I didn't make myself. That there is one that is breathing me. There is one that is not only breathing me, that there is one that is me. And so, yet as you thought, yet as your thought, talking about God's thought, not talking about my thought. My thought led me into thinking I made myself. God thought said, I created you. See, there's a difference between creation and made. Yet, as you thought, Father, I have not left myself, source. Even though at one point I thought I made myself. He said, but in reality, I haven't left my source. I haven't left my creator. I haven't left the essence of who I am. I haven't separated myself. I thought I did, but I hadn't. I have not left my source. That's what the Course says, what ideas leave not their source. You are a God idea, and it's impossible for you to leave the source of the idea, which is God. So you always and will always be what God is. Not something else, but what God is. The I am is not something else, but the I am is the name that God gave to God is. So the I am is your name too. But who you are and what you are is God is. And there is nothing else. And so, I have not left my source, remaining part of who created me. There was several lessons in here that says we remain as God created us. I remain as God created me. So important that we remember that. So your creation, my Father, calls on you today. Father, I call on you today. That's what it says here. Let me remember you created me. Let me remember you created me. Let me remember my identity. This is a course in identity. A true identity. True perception. This is a course in identity. That's what the miracle is. When you discover who you are, that's a miracle. Your awakening is the miracle. Your enlightenment is the miracle. Your new birth is the miracle. You're remembering who you are. That's the miracle. So, the whole dramatic platform has been about our forgetting. All the unloving things you have ever experienced that you have ever observed. Came about because of what? Our forgetting who we were, who we are. But today we remember that God created us. And so we remember our identification. And let my sinlessness, because in remembering who you are, you remember that you are sinless. It's never been a part of your true identity. The world has made the concept or the idea of sin huge and have placed people in a place of damnation and guilt and condemnation and judgment. That's what the world thought system has done. But here today, like he says, today, Father. But today, let me remember you created me. I call on you today in remembrance of me. He said, but today I remember that you created me, and I let me remember my identity, and let my sinlessness arise again before Christ's vision, before the vision of our oneness. Let this arise before me. Let me, because I have released myself from self-deception, from the false identity, from the false self that we made, that I made, that the ego system have made. He says, let my sinlessness arise again before Christ's vision, through which I would look upon my brothers. So I not only see myself in my sinlessness, in my innocence, but I see my brother the same way. So I have no judgment. You are experiencing what you're experiencing because of your choice, but I have no judgment. I'm experiencing what I'm experiencing because of my choice. I don't even judge myself. It's a matter of, this is what experience I wanted to play with. And God is using the content of our life. God is using the experience of our life to wake us up. How wise is that? So nothing is lost. And so we judge nothing. Why? Because the purpose of God is prevailing. Regardless of how bad it looks, how ugly it looks, how much we may not understand in the moment, we have to know that only the purposes of God shall prevail. Love shall prevail. Reality shall prevail. This fleeting world, this coming and going experience that we're having, is fleeting. It is coming to a dramatic end. In the sense that it comes to an end when you wake up. Because it's all an illusion. It's all that what happens in a perceptual world, a temporal world, but it's not reality. And so we can now abide here and not be bamboozled by what the unreality of what is happening. But we now become the symbol of light. We become the symbol of truth to help our brother, to help the brotherhood. It says it right here. I will look upon my brother and myself today, and our sinlessness and our holiness and our reality as one with you. And so now is our source remembered. Now is our reality remembered. Now is our love remembered. Now who we are, it's remembered. Now is all sin, guilt, and fear consciousness removed. It's removed. Why? We no longer give any credence to it. We can see clearly now. The rain has gone. The illusion has gone. The false self has gone. Where did it go? Back into the nothingness that it is. It went with it left when we released the idea of something other than what God is. And so our self-image of ourselves is the same and in alignment and in harmony with our reality. And so now is our source remembered. And therein what? The remembrance of our source. Our source is God. It said, therein we find our true identity. At last, our true identity is in God. God is our only reality. God is our only source. God is our only being, our only self, our only life. We are indeed oneness, joined as one with that oneness. At last, the son has returned home. The daughter has returned home. By releasing the false self, by releasing the belief in separation. By releasing the belief in an unloving father. Because to believe in separation, to believe that you're a sinner, to believe in birth and death, is to believe that God is an unloving father. Even a natural father, even natural parents demonstrate unconditional love towards their children. How much more to the Father of life, to the giver of life, to the source of all life. Is perfect in all measure. So where did the ideal come from? We made it up. And because we made it up, guess what? We can choose again. We can wake up. We can but remember. And in that remembrance is our salvation. In that remembrance is our freedom. In that remembrance is our clarity, is our certainty, is our joy, our peace. So in conclusion of this section on what is sin, here's the conclusion. Holy indeed are we. That's the conclusion. That the man-made idea of sin that led to sin consciousness and led to madness is not a reality. It's not a part of love. And therefore, we have no allegiance, no credence to that idea anymore. We see who we are. We know who we are. And here it says, holy indeed are we. We are the holy home of God, as the Course says. We have been created in holiness and in righteousness. Like Paul said in Ephesians 1, he got a revelation of that. That before the foundation of the world, I'll read it again. He said, according as he has what created us, chosen us before the foundation of the world, that we should be what? Holy and without blame before him in love. And that's how we are. That's how you've always been. Some people tell me, you mean to tell me that I tucked the bait, hook, line, and sinker? I said, yep, we all did for a minute. So holy indeed are we, because our source, because our Father, because our Creator knows no sin. He knows no sin. There is no sin. Like the Course says, sin is an illusion. It's a false idea about who we are. And we made that up. We made it up. Kept ourselves in chains and in bondage and in pain and suffering. Well-meaning, but just the same. Didn't eliminate the experience. But now, by the grace, now by the mercy, now by the unchanging one, now by the awareness of the truth that is true always, we say yes to our true identity. And it makes everything else irrelevant. There is no pain. There is no suffering. There is no vulnerability. There's no fear. There's no death. There's no lack. There's no scarcity. There's no beginning. There's no end when you wake up. There's no multiple choice. There's only the one. And so because our source knows no sin, that we are holy indeed, and we who are God's creation are like each other. We are like each other. That's what Jesus was coming to bring us, the message of our oneness. We're like each other. There is no difference. There is equality. He said, we're like each other. And we are like to him or her or it. We are like into our source. We are like unto our God. We are like into our Creator. There's no difference. There's only the one self. There's only the one I am. There's only the one being. There's only the one love. And we all share in that equally. We all share into that equally. So there's only really the one self. And you are that one self. You are that God is. You are that I am. It'll take some time to get used to that. I understand. I came into this awareness back in 2005. Blew me away. And I've been getting used to this idea ever since. And I come to realize that that all things are mine. I begin to realize that because who I am, I require certain things. Not necessarily physical things, but whatever it takes for me to live life full out, I require it. And like Jesus said, he said, what? Seek ye first the awareness of who you are, and the things that you will require will be what? They will be added unto you. And so that which I will require is always added to me. I always attract them. You always will attract what's required of you when your mind is aligned and in harmony with your true identity. And so life becomes so much sweeter, so much what? Less effort, so much at ease. That's what Jesus meant when he says what? My yoke is easy. My message is light. My burden is light. He said it's so light that it'll be added unto you. So let us remember, God created us. And there is no sin. That we are the holy home of God. That we are representatives. We are ambassadors. This is not our home. So we are on an ambassadorship mission here now that we have awakened. And you know how that works in the natural. If you're an ambassador for a country, what? Everything is provided for you. And so there's a mindset, see? There's a way of thinking that has to be in place. See, when you don't think as the ambassador that you are, then you feel like you got to go and what? You got to go and find everything. You got to go and gather what you need. And while you're going to find and gather things and stuff, you left what was already given. And you've gone off. It's kind of like, that's how we got here. We went off looking for something that was already there, like the prodigal son. Like Adam and Eve, they left the garden looking for something because they thought God was holding back on them. My. Well, that is workbook lesson 260. And that's the end of the section on the last 10 lessons. So we start a new section for the next 10 lessons. We'll be dealing with what is the body? What is the body from the course's perspective? You know, there's a lot to be said about that. So stay tuned for the next 10 lessons as we'll get into teaching on what is the body. What is it? I got this body, so what is it for? What's the real McCoy? As you said, it's not me, Oliver. So what is it for? We'll get into that. Stay tuned. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Be blessed. Bye-bye.